were found in a vacant home on Cedarhurst Trail. Investigators suspect foul play, they say. If you have any information that could help police, please call Crime Stoppers. A deadly hit and run on the downtown connector this morning. Police say a man was walking along the interstate when someone hit and killed him and kept on going. It happened after 2 a.m. at Cortlandt Street in the downtown area. Officers are now looking for a dark blue Chevy Malibu with front end damage. Let's take a live look through our Georgia Power camera. Some cloud cover today, but relatively mild. Not a bad day.
Yeah, weather during MLK Jr. Day event with one of the victims listed in critical condition. The shots rang out at Iola's Ellis Park during an MLK car show and Family Fun Day, which the sheriff's office said was attended by more than 1,000 people. Police said 4 people, including a child, sustained non-life-threatening injuries. From authorities' initial investigation, there was a disagreement of some sort between 2 parties, and unfortunately, they chose to resolve that with guns. Watch Rista early Monday morning. Check out this terrifying encounter. Surveillance camera footage released by the Auburn Police Department shows the man grabbing the barista's arm as she hands him money, with what police described as a looped zip tie device. The man, who police said has a distinctive arm tattoo, quickly gives up and drives off, leaving the dollar bills on the ground. According to local reports, the attempted abduction took place at a coffee stand in Auburn.
Marxism, you get to economic Marxism. It's about overthrowing the American system and our way of life. And so, at the roots, you keep going back, you get to communism. And we know that millions of people around the world have lost their lives to communism, which has always promised that false utopia. And instead of a utopia, it's always brought death and degradation of people.
And lastly, if I could ask you before we let you go, if you could tell the younger generation why Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was so significant and effective, what would you tell them?
I believe that he was sincere, and he believed in the humanity and our innate goodness. And I would tell them that Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they have nothing in common with Dr. Martin Luther King and his vision. And there are progressives that have tried to hijack Dr. King's legacy. You know, Dr. King, like every human being in America, our founding fathers, and I claim the founding fathers as my founding fathers.
Intense. Now, more cities and states are passing legislation to ban sleeping on streets, in cars, or in tent cities. Experts say they expect the numbers to increase as housing costs increase. Critics say that these new restrictions are unlawful and violate individual civil rights.
More scope to intervene quickly. Downing Street says that under the proposed changes, police would not need to wait for disruption to take place. They could shut down demonstrations before they escalate. Human rights group Liberty said the plan amounted to an attack on the right to protest. Their director, Martha Spurrier, said, allowing the police to shut down protests before any disruption has taken place simply on the off chance that it might, sets a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley gave his backing to the proposals. He said the police are getting drawn into complex legal arguments about balancing the right to protest and the rights of others to go about their daily lives freely, and said, clarity will create a clearer line for the police to enforce when protests impact upon others who simply wish to go about their lawful business. The Public Order Bill is aimed at curbing guerrilla tactics used by groups like Insulate Britain and Extinction Rebellion. Number 10 said police would not need to treat a series of protests by the same group as standalone incidents, but would be able to consider their total impact. Officers would be able to take into consideration long-running campaigns designed to cause repeat disruption over a period of days or weeks. The bill is currently undergoing line-by-line scrutiny in the House of Lords,
Gluing yourself to the street?
At the end of this month. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Injured. Officers were called to a church in Euston on Saturday afternoon, where a memorial service was taking place for a young woman and her mother. Police said shotgun pellets were fired from a black Toyota before it was driven off. Witnesses said the shots sent mourners running and screaming, with many of them sheltering inside the church. 4 women and 2 children were injured in the attack. The 7-year-old girl remains in hospital in a serious but stable condition. Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack said today the government will block a Scottish bill that makes it easier for people to change their legal gender. It's the first time the government has invoked the power to veto a Scottish law. Ministers are concerned the bill will conflict with equalities legislation. The Scottish government is expected to contest the move in court.
Police apologised on Monday to Carrick's victims.
On behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service, I am truly sorry that they have suffered at the hands of this police officer. Carrick is a prolific serial sex offender who preyed on women over a period of many years, abusing his position as a police officer and committing the most horrific, degrading crimes.
Carrick appeared at Southwark Crown Court on Monday to plead guilty to 4 counts of rape, false imprisonment and indecent assault relating to a 40-year-old woman in 2003. Outside the court, the prosecutor said this was one of the most shocking cases the Crown Prosecution Service has dealt with, involving a serving police officer.
This is a man who relentlessly degraded, belittled, sexually assaulted and raped women. As time went on, the severity of his offending intensified as he became emboldened, thinking he would get away with it.
Carrick joined the Met in 2001 and became an armed officer with the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command in 2009. He was only suspended after being arrested over a second rape complaint in 2021.
Whilst much of his offending was not known to the Met, there was an escalation of abusive behaviours that should have been identified.
Carrick met some of the women through online dating sites such as Tinder and Badoo, or on social occasions, using his position as a police officer to gain their trust. He locked some of his victims in a small cupboard under the stairs in his Hertfordshire home for hours without food. Carrick whipped one woman with a belt and told some of his victims when they could eat and sleep. He had come to the attention of police over 9 incidents between 2000 and 2021. Carrick will be sentenced.
Fugitive, he was finally caught at a private health care clinic in Palmero. His arrest is the culmination of years of investigating that led to a private clinic just outside Sicily. The arrest is so significant, the Italian Prime Minister flew to the area to personally thank the officers who made the arrest.
When we talk about power, we have to think that the mafia actually put their people in administrative positions. They have dozens in public administration.
Denaro is now in a secret location and faces several life sentences.
New reports show
so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.
Especially is now under pressure to allow the export of the Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine. The Kremlin said the new supplies would not change the situation on the ground.
As fighting continues in eastern Ukraine, the United Kingdom's government has confirmed that it will be the first NATO country to supply its ally with Western tanks. A squadron of 14 tanks called the Challenger 2 will deploy to the conflict in the coming weeks. But what is the Challenger 2 and what kind of impact can it have on the war? The Challenger 2 is what's called a main battle tank, or MBT, and it's specifically designed to attack other tanks and armored vehicles, seen here during NATO exercises 2 years ago. Until now, Ukraine's military has primarily relied on its older Soviet-era tanks. It's also captured and repurposed some of Russia's during the invasion. President Zelensky has long pleaded with allied countries to include their tanks in aid packages, but some Western officials have been cautious over the concern that Russia or even China could get their hands on advanced Western military technology. Moscow is also likely to see the introduction of Western tanks onto the battlefield as an escalation of the war, and NATO is desperate not to be drawn more directly into it. The Challenger 2 has been in service with the British Army since 1994 and has been deployed to Bosnia, Iraq, and other crises. The UK's gift could put added pressure on other NATO countries, particularly the US and Germany, to give their own tanks, which have so far resisted. Along with the Challenger 2, Britain's also giving Ukraine about 30 artillery vehicles called the AS-90. It will take time to train the Ukrainian forces on how to use the British tanks and artillery, and Russia's London embassy is dismissing the development. The embassy says the Challengers are unlikely to turn the tide of the war, will drag it out, and will be targeted by Russia's own forces.
Eurasian Times reports that when intense combat broke out in the east of Ukraine, the Russian defense minister vowed on January 10th to expand the country's military preparedness, bolstering it with advanced aviation technology and increased drone production. Earlier this month, President Vladimir Putin ordered his defense minister to create a report on how military units are supplied, including details of weapons and equipment delivered to the military and suggestions for enhancing the defense ministry's operations. The order was given in the wake of some significant battlefield losses incurred by the Russian military in Ukraine. Putin made a high-voltage pitch to his country's defense industry on his visit to Tula, a center for arms manufacturing, stating, quote, "The most important task of our military-industrial complex is to provide our units and frontline forces with everything they need: weapons, equipment, ammunition, and gear in the necessary quantities and of the right quality in the shortest possible time frames," end quote. The Russian state news agency published an exhaustive list of advanced weapon systems that will be inducted into the military in 2023, based on official announcements from the Defense Ministry. The list includes equipment for all three branches of the military, as well as Russia's nuclear-capable strategic force. In what could prove to be a year of hypersonic weaponry, the Russian Ministry of Defense has vowed to increase the supplies of high-precision hypersonic missile systems and continue working on other, quote, promising samples, end quote. Russia will most assuredly be getting financial help from China in this all-out militarization campaign. So says retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Kevin Ryan. He said this in a Tuesday interview with Insider. This possibility could occur, said Ryan, who was also the former U.S. military attaché to Russia, with the goal of not only taking out Ukrainian troops, but also forcing Kiev into surrendering to avoid a nuclear Holocaust scenario. Moscow could make this move if one of two things happen. Ukraine's forces are about to utterly defeat the Russian military in the field. Ukraine's forces are about to finally retake the Crimean Peninsula that Moscow annexed in 2014. Russia, well, they have threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons on several occasions throughout the course of the war, which is now stretching into its 11th month. Putin said in a speech last summer, quote, "Those who are trying to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the wind can turn in their direction," end quote. Obviously, watch this video. In May of last year, Chinese media outlets covered the launch of an unmanned ship called the Zhu Heihun. According to the South China Morning Post, that ship could also carry dozens of drones, unmanned ships, and submersible craft. Watch this.
在我身后就是全球第一艘的这个具有最多的智能符号的这个船，它可以搭载50多条不同的无人系统，包括无人艇、无人机和水下潜器，实行一个组网的立体的海洋观测。
境舰上配备了专用于无人系统的布放、通讯、遥控、保障等设备设施，在软件上增加了无人系统跨域协同作业的指挥系统。No analog, end quote. That's what Putin said. He went on to say, quote, this is a hypersonic sea-based system, end quote. Putin sent off the ship shortly after Russian and Chinese forces held a set of joint military drills focused on hunting enemy submarines. Drills indicate the two countries may be concerned with how to counter U.S. and NATO submarine forces in a potential future conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. Last year, a Russian lawmaker threatened that Russia could destroy the entire east coast of the United States with just 2 missiles if Putin ordered such a strike. During an appearance on Russian TV, one parliament member said at the time, quote, I will tell you absolutely, completely, that to destroy the east coast of the United States, 2 Sarmat missiles are needed, end quote. He went on to say, quote, the same goes for the West Coast, end quote. Quote, 4 missiles, and there will be nothing left, end quote. Well,
among others.
If any of these bills happen to reach my desk, I will veto them.
Joe Biden's wide-ranging speech comes amid the political fallout of classified documents continuing to be found at his home. Biden on Monday quickly went inside the White House, ignoring reporters' questions.
Mr. President, are you sure there are no more classified documents?
Over the weekend, the White House announced it had found 5 additional pages of documents at Biden's home on Thursday night. That revelation coming 2 days after the White House assured us the search is clearly complete, and a day after it said, we have been transparent in the last couple of days. Republicans are now demanding to see all communications related to searches by Biden's team. They're also asking the White House to turn over visitor logs of Biden's home by the end of this month. But the White House said on Monday there are no visitor logs for Biden's home in Delaware, as this is personal residence. An administration is slamming Republicans for launching investigations, telling Fox News on Monday the House Republicans are, quote, playing politics in a shamelessly hypocritical attempt to attack President Biden.
The administration hasn't been transparent. We'll have to seek it through testimony with family members or those who have been at the residence. This is very, very important information for the American people.
House Republicans, meanwhile, fired back on Monday by vowing to continue pressing the administration for answers, in particular about who had access to those documents and why Biden's aides were allowed to continue searching Biden's home even after the DOJ's appointment of a special counsel. Reporting from the White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
Troops, we are losing resources, and I fail to see what our return on investment is going to be. I feel for their people, for certain, but how much more will this go on? Number 4, Disney went woke. With Bob Chapek at the helm, the Mouse House went down the tubes, trying to capitulate to a loud few. They changed the way that their theme parks addressed genders and produced a slate of content that was just bizarre and unprofitable. They attacked the
nations there an alternative to dealing with Beijing. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is set to meet with Chinese Vice Premier Liu He in Switzerland on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. Let's zoom in on what officials say they'll talk about.
According to a Treasury official, they'll also cover global challenges like the possibility of a world recession, the corresponding risks, and how to boost cooperation. The in-person talks come as U.S.-Beijing relations remain tense, despite their trade ties. Washington has blocked the sale of advanced computer chips to China and is considering a ban on investment in some Chinese tech companies. What's more, Beijing's threats to invade Taiwan have proven another point of conflict. The U.S. has said it would defend the island in that situation. Yellen has also criticized China's financing practices on the African continent, calling them economic practices that have disadvantaged all of us. Likewise, she's
in which biological males began to beat their female counterparts as they were allowed to compete with one another. J.K. Rowling, author of the famous Harry Potter books, drew fire for standing up for the definition of a woman, since she's a proud feminist. But even her own Harry Potter actors that she cast decided to trendily attack her. Number 8, the Oscars were a joke, but Will Smith's slap was not. In a jaw-dropping moment, Chris Rock's jaw was jabbed. It was a stunning moment in Oscars history, and probably one that they'd like back, because we won't remember.
The world's most populous country has worried about aging citizenry's effect on its economy and society, but its population was not expected to go into decline for almost a decade. The National Bureau of Statistics, however, reported that the country had 850,000 fewer people at the end of 2022 than the previous year. It counts only the population of mainland China, while excluding Hong Kong and Macau. According to the Bureau, a total of 1.41 billion reside there, with nearly 1 million more deaths than births. China has been the world's most populous country for decades, but is expected to soon be overtaken for India, if that hasn't already happened. India is at 1.4 billion and growing.